Welcome, everybody. My name is the Reverend Joseph Santos Lyons. I serve as the community minister with DRUM, our UU People of Color ministry, and we're grateful to be able to hold this space alongside many other community ministries and organizations and religious professionals, and a collective of folks centering the voices specifically of our Palestinian, Southwest Asia, North Africa, and Arab descent folks. And this is a continuation of a space we've been holding since the terrible events of October 7th, where we are lamenting the violence. We're calling for more than peace, for deep justice and liberation, and have been listening to the voices of those who are more directly affected. Today's service is going to center more of our BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color, and Palestinian voices, and we'll be having a service again on July 21st centering Jewish UU voices. We hope that you will continue to stay connected with us. We also want to recognize that many of us have come out of the General Assembly, where we worked very hard on a resolution entitled Solidarity with Palestinians, which passed the General Assembly with overwhelming support. And we continue to hold both the political and the pastoral in these spaces together. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you to the collective of lay and religious professionals who have helped make these services and these vigils possible.
Beloveds, will you enter this space with me? With a breath of gratitude, a breath of grief, a breath of rage, a breath of power. Tomorrow marks 9 months into this genocide. Tomorrow marks 9 months into a time which millions upon millions of people have been crying out for peace in its truest sense. We've been crying out for justice in its fullest sense. Tomorrow marks 9 months in which we as a community have also claimed collective power in trying to move our progressive faith forward. We as Unitarian Universalists came together to grieve, to lament, to rage, and to start shifting our faith towards something a little bit more accountable to the values we claim to hold. We came together to pass an action of immediate witness in solidarity with Palestinians, and it wasn't just passing an action of immediate witness, but coming together in community, coming together to remind each other that we are here in this space and we will not be ignored any longer. We grounded ourselves in a call for ceasefire, a call that should be universally held by every single one of our people. Knowing that it was a baseline, knowing that a free Palestine was the sky. Today, we honor the complexity of what it means to be people making a shift in a faith that continues to resist the possibility that love invites us into, that love demands we create. We hold the complexity, we hold the possibility, we hold all that we are feeling in this moment. And so I invite everybody in this room who has already shared what they are yearning for in their hearts, but to share, what is it you are feeling in this moment? What is it that is on your hearts that you are feeling now? To drop that in the chat. wishing it wasn't so hard to prove humanity, feeling helpless, disappointed in people, rage and helplessness, deep, profound grief and sorrow, high frustration level, anger, feeling ready after hearing news about France, helplessness. I welcome folks to continue to share, perplexed to see so much apathy. I welcome folks to continue to share what it is you are feeling in this moment, to continue to know that you don't have to hold it alone. Part of what makes us feel helpless in these moments is feeling as though we are the only one, that I cannot make a difference, but together we can actually make an impact, as we saw this past month in our faith. So I welcome you to share what it is with your community here today, and know that you do not have to carry it alone.
Today I'll be sharing a reading with you from the poet laureate Palestinian American Zaina Azam, and this poem is called Immigrant. I grew up eating cheese with bitter olives, sesame and thyme infused olive oil on warm bread. Names in my family all meant something, like lifelong challenges: beautiful, splendid, victorious, forgiving. In my childhood books, words flowed from right to left. Direction didn't matter then. At 10, we traveled east to west against time. I gained 7 hours of youth, lost my compass. In New York, no sea to swallow the sun each day. Foods were sweet in America. People spoke as fast as they walked. Everything was large. Washing machines, supermarkets, even bananas and red grapes. We settled in this vast, cold place with neither boots nor a sense of how to be warm. Snowfalls were beautiful and cruel. The freezing air slapped our faces each morning. Inside, there was the smell of garlic and onions on the stove, loud talking over the phone with relatives overseas. My family inhaled and exhaled politics like cigarettes all the time. We blamed the British, the Americans, Arab leaders, Zionists, communists, or a history that was simply unkind. The TV in the background reported news in a language we spoke but did not really understand. All this over a good meal, always, as if the hunger was in our bellies and not in our hearts.
My name is Yvonne Duval, and I serve as the Director of Music Ministries at the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg in Pennsylvania. My great-grandparents were born in Bethlehem and immigrated to El Salvador around 1917 as youth. Many Palestinian families immigrated there beginning in the late 1800s and quickly found community with each other, as they were often not accepted by mainstream society. None were considered citizens of the country until the latter half of the 20th century. My mother immigrated to the US in her late 20s, and her generation was the first to marry outside of this community. I was raised traveling to visit our extended family every couple of years and experienced a fusion of both Palestinian and Salvadoran cultures. Some of my older relatives still spoke Arabic, and there was a sense of pride in their rich heritage. My memories of El Salvador include the stark contrasts from my life in Colorado. Hundreds of children slept on the concrete steps of the airport, begging international tourists for money. Many parents lost their lives during the Civil War, leaving behind children with nobody to nurture or care for them. Others were severely injured and unable to provide for their families. Abject poverty was apparent at almost every glance. My grandparents' lower middle-class, meager home sported iron bars over windows, with the neighborhood men taking turns patrolling the streets with machine guns, warding off any with ill intent. Even the grocery stores had at least one security guard donning a machine gun, and as a preteen, I absolutely refused to fulfill a dare for my cousin to steal a pack of gum. One of our trips to El Salvador was in 1989, in the midst of the 12-year Salvadoran Civil War. One evening, we were visiting a wealthy uncle. While in the massive courtyard surrounded by the house, my younger sister and I heard loud booms and cracks as the sky lit up off in the distance. My 6-year-old mind could only conclude excitedly that fireworks had just begun. But I was quickly disappointed as the adults swiftly herded us indoors. We were trapped in the country for a week longer than anticipated, and were only able to leave once my uncle drove us over the border to Guatemala, chartered a private plane to Mexico City, and we boarded a commercial flight back to the US. I have absolutely no recollection of these events and was only later told as I grew up. My parents and the other adult relatives were somehow able to shelter my sister and me from the reality of the terrors around us. While sitting at home with my family on the evening of July 4th, choosing to not partake in the holiday's rituals, we could hear the fireworks off in the distance, and all I could think of are the horrors of war. The parents of Gaza do not have the luxury to shelter their children from the violence surrounding them. Incredibly few have the documents, connections, and upwards of $10,000 per person to try and secure a departure into Egypt. Unlike myself at 6, Palestinian children will never mistake the sound of a rocket launcher for fireworks. As my mind shifted to those in Gaza, I recognized the incredible sense of security my family is privileged with. As we enter into the 10th month of this current iteration of genocide, I find myself losing hope. Rather than being able to offer words of encouragement, I join you this evening to mourn the precious lives that have been lost, those injured, and families ripped apart. When I'm feeling especially sad, angry, or helpless, I try to take moments to celebrate my heritage by sharing a freshly baked tray of baklava with others, cooking marmon, known as maftoul outside of Bethlehem, or watching my child joyfully fly a kite. I invite each of you to also seek out similar moments in the midst of despair.
Good evening, beloveds. I am the Reverend Ranwa Hamami. I serve as the Congregational Justice Organizer on the Side with Love organizing strategy team. I am a light brown skinned person of Egyptian and Lebanese descent with dark brown hair, red glasses, purple shirt, and behind me are bookcases and various justice paraphernalia. And I am here joining you all on the unceded lands of the Chochenyo Ohlone peoples, known as Oakland, California. I have tattooed on my wrist the words Sabr and Shukr. Sabr and Shukr are two parallel concepts in the Islamic traditions, which I grew up in and still hold to. Sabr, meaning patient perseverance. Shukr, meaning a deep gratitude for all that we receive and that we don't quite know how much we receive. You know how in many languages that aren't English, a single word holds about a paragraph's worth of meaning. That's what these are on my wrist. And these words in particular resonate so deeply with me in this moment as a Unitarian Universalist, as a Unitarian Universalist Muslim, and a Unitarian Universalist of SWANA descent, because our journey as a faith tradition to reach its destined location as being in shared struggle for Palestinian and collective liberation is one that we have patiently persevered through and continue to patiently and exhaustedly persevere through. In 2016, that was a year that many of us carry a lot of trauma around General Assembly. I had just received preliminary fellowship and was about to walk across the stage, proud to be a UU minister in formation. Many of us know that that year there was a business resolution encouraging that was going to require us to, as a faith tradition, to divest from organizations and investments that benefited from Israel's occupation of Palestinian lands. And it was a very traumatic moment for many of us because of the ways in which the debate happened around that, the ways in which people said some truly awful things, prioritized one people's pain over another's people's genocide. People continue, it was a lot. And I don't have a very profound way to put it because, like many of you, I am tired. But what was particularly hard for me that year was not even just that debate, but it was at the opening ceremony when we had allegedly we're going to have 3 people from 3 different faith traditions speak: a Christian, a Jew, and a Muslim. You know, good old joke punchline start. However, our Muslim speaker could not make it that day. And unfortunately, the person who spoke from the Jewish perspective came out and explicitly blasted this business resolution as part of the opening ceremony. That in and of itself would have been enough to make me want to walk out the door. But what was even more difficult for me was right after that moment, myself and many other youth and young adults of color had to proudly go up and light the chalice for our ceremony. And in that moment, I had to do some significant discernment. Was I going to stay in this faith and allow something like this to happen? Was I going to go up and light this chalice with this group of people and say absolutely nothing about what injustice had just occurred? Or was I going to go up, grab that mic and say, hey, y'all, what just happened was not okay, and now you're going to parade a bunch of brown and black folk up here? Sabr and shukr. Sabr and shukr kept going through my head. I had to patiently persevere in that moment because this was not the first time our faith had failed me or failed us, and it was not going to be the last. And so in that moment, I channeled my rage into a stomped out sung chalice lighting with this group, knowing that I was going to patiently persevere in this moment. This faith was not going to hear the last of me and of all of us yet. Fast forward to today. I am a Unitarian Universalist Association employee, and this action of immediate witness comes up, and I am not allowed to have a formal opinion. Sabr and shukr. The work that this group has been doing, the work that these vigil spaces have been offering, the work that those organizing for Palestinian liberation have been doing for not just these last 9 months, but for years within our faith tradition, have been slowly inching this faith towards what it should truly be positioned as. Sabr and shukr. Sabr. I sit in an institutional role, patiently trying to inch it forward, because those of us who have served in institutions know how slow that process can be. And I hold shukr, I hold that deep gratitude for every single one of you in this room, all of you on the signal threads, and there are a lot of those signal threads, moving things forward in assertive and powerful ways, because that is how change happens. Sabr and shukr. We did a thing at General Assembly. It was hard, it was powerful, it was painful, but we did something. And that is so crucial for us to hold on to as we patiently persevere, as we impatiently move our faith forward. I am deeply grateful for all of you in the midst of all we are holding and yearning for. I am deeply grateful for what we are making our faith become.
A couple months ago, I played with a 3-year-old boy. The meeting I was in was so incredibly boring that I couldn't help but play Hot Wheels with this child. He was having so much more fun than the adults in the room, and I wanted to have fun as well. It was good to be a kid again. I seldom interact with children in my daily life. This is for a variety of reasons, but one of those is simply avoidance. For months now, children have only brought me sadness. Because when I see a child, I look at them not for what they are in that moment, but what could occur to them. I see them covered in gray soot. I see them with blood streaming down their face, shivering at the sight of existence. It's like having flashbacks in a horror film, only to come to reality and realize that horror is very much material. At one point, playing with this child, he looked at the ring on my hand and asked what it was. "It's an evil eye," I told him. He looked at me curiously. Of course he wouldn't know about the evil eye. He's only 3 years old, I thought to myself. I clarified for him. The evil eye is used to protect against evil. He again looked at me with more confusion. Then he said something truly profound. He asked, "What is evil?" I took a moment to think, how do I translate such a malign concept to a 3-year-old? Evil is when bad people do bad things. I was proud of that explanation at the time and half expected him to ask me to define bad. But he didn't do that. He did something that truly terrified me, that made chills run up my spine, made my lungs reject the air which I breathed. He turned his body towards me. He looked at my ears, my nose, my eyebrows, the hair atop my head. This lasted for a good 10 seconds. Then he looked me straight in the eyes. And this is when a remarkable uneasiness struck me. For it was as if some divine entity, some godly formation, possessed this boy and judged me harshly, looked at me with a grave disappointment, a contempt so beyond anything fathomable. Then the boy broke his gaze, turned around, and ran off to play, leaving me with the emptiness of my thoughts. Maybe evil isn't when bad people do bad things. Maybe it's when good people are tricked into doing bad things. Fundamentally, I do not see evil as some supernatural phenomena, because despite what the ring on my finger would, say about that, but the supernaturality of evil is too easy of an explanation. No, evil is something which must be cultivated and capitulated. It is something which needs sun and water and room to grow. I remember many years ago a Christian man reminding me that good is a struggle, a challenge even, that wickedness is the easy path. Maybe evil isn't when bad people do bad things. Maybe it's when we stray from the righteous path. As a boy, my friends and I would beat each other up. We'd wrestle on the ground and manipulate each other's bodies into submission. We'd kick and punch and yell out glorious war cries. In truth, I remember many of those moments like it was yesterday. I remember the feeling of power that came from enacting violence. We were just play fighting, and yet, as a child, there was an allure to control, to the brawn of tyranny. Maybe evil isn't when bad people do bad things. Maybe it's something deep inside of us that we learn to suppress. The truth is, I had no right answering that 3-year-old little boy, because I did not know that answer. I still don't know that answer. I can explain the processes of dehumanization, subjugation, the sheer delusions of an oppressive force. I can explain how political inaction and lack of substantive opposition stirs immorality amongst the populace. I can explain how evil acts are facilitated by ideology and methods by which people avoid their own moral failings. However, I failed to answer the simplest of questions in the simplest of terms. And maybe that's because evil cannot be put in the simplest of terms. You all will leave here today, and I am sorry to tell you that you will see and experience more evil. And it is important to understand evil, to study evil, because we cannot stop something, we cannot combat something if we do not understand it.
I just opened the chat, and we had the chat off for our reflection space, and I asked how folks' hearts were, and we've heard that folks their hearts are heavy. There's been a lot of gratitude for our speakers, and Summer's drumming, some tender hearts. Hopefully everyone can message in the chat about lifted, tender, heavy hearts. Thanks so much for this space, for all of our speakers, and for being here with us.
I want to say my mom worked with me to find the reading that I did earlier, and my dad helped to share what I'd like to use as our closing words today. It's a quote from Nazim Hikmat, short poem. Masses are like water. They seep from the clenched fist of a hand. You cannot hold back the masses. They will find their way to the struggle.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you, Reverend Remwa, Devin, Leilani, Yvonne, Reverend Mitra, and all. We're going to bring the vigil to a close, and as we leave this space, wanted to share just a couple of announcements for the community. One is you can learn more about the action of immediate witness that was shared here that passed our General Assembly at uupalestineaction.org. We'll keep the website up for the year. Thanks so much, Rachel. Shout out to Rachel who worked on the campaign. And for those who are available, we'll be gathering again on July 21st. And this service upcoming that Reverend Beecher has been helping us build the liturgy for will be centering more UU Jewish descent voices and continuing to hold and expand space and build our community. We're not going to have breakout sessions today, but we may have them again in the future. And we are looking to side with love in the UUA now that the resolution has passed for potentially, continuing to offer support, resources, make connections, which they've already been doing, but this may give them some more, potentially more capacity and more permission to continue to be visible on this issue. Thank you so much for being here, and we hope that in future vigils you're welcome to spread the word. This is open to all, and we hear again and again how valuable it is to hold these spaces, because I know sometimes in our local communities and in our congregations there may not always be these voices being heard. So please continue to take these back, pay them forward, and we will be posting recordings of the vigils on our YouTube page, youtube.com/@DRUUMM, and I'll drop it into the chat. With that, I think we'll begin to come to a close and invite Devin to send us off with some beautiful music. Thank you all, beloveds. Good evening, good afternoon, good night.